Hey man, let's talk about something that most men sense but few have the courage to face. That uneasy shift in a woman's behavior when you're not her best option anymore. It's not always loud, not always dramatic, but it's there. In the pauses between texts, the faint hesitation in her voice, the sudden emotional distance that wasn't there before. When you're not her top priority, she doesn't necessarily leave, she just starts to fade. Piece by piece, her investment dissolves. Her affection turns into politeness, her warmth turns into routine, and her curiosity about your life turns into tolerance. And the worst part, you'll feel it before you ever see it. Because when a woman starts to emotionally drift, her energy changes first. Her words may sound the same, but her tone will give her away. At first, you'll try to rationalize it. You'll tell yourself she's busy, tired, stressed, or just not herself lately. You'll replay her old messages, remembering how excited she used to sound when she talked to you. You'll convince yourself that it's temporary, that she'll come back around once things calm down. But deep down, you already know. You feel the imbalance. You notice how conversations that used to flow now feel forced. How she used to ask about your day, but now just replies with one-word answers. How her laughter used to sound like music, but now feels rehearsed. The truth is, when a woman's emotions start shifting toward another man, or even just the idea of one, her entire vibe changes. She doesn't mean to disrespect you, but she can't fake excitement she no longer feels. And here's where most men go wrong. They start chasing harder. They think effort will fix everything. They double down on compliments, send longer texts, make more plans, and try to remind her how good they've been. But what they don't realize is this. Once a woman starts mentally comparing you to someone else, logic no longer matters. You can't reason with emotions. You can't convince attraction. You can't negotiate desire. When she feels that spark elsewhere, even if it's just in her imagination, your presence begins to feel heavy to her. The same affection that once made her smile now feels suffocating. The same love that once grounded her now feels like an obligation. Because in her heart, she's already halfway gone. When you're not her best option, the smallest details will start to shift. She'll take longer to reply, not because she's testing you, but because your messages don't trigger the same dopamine rush they once did. She'll stop dressing up around you. She'll cancel plans more often, but somehow she's always available for something else. She'll seem distracted when you talk, like her mind is elsewhere, and truth be told, it probably is. When women start detaching, they don't argue. They go quiet. They stop fighting for connection because they've already accepted the emotional exit. And that's what makes it so hard to notice. It's not dramatic, it's gradual, like a light dimming over time until one day you realize you're sitting in the dark alone. Here's the harsh truth. A woman will never admit you're not her best option. She'll just act differently. Because women know how deeply that realization can crush a man's confidence. Instead, she'll say she's confused, not ready for a relationship, or just needs space. But what she really means is, you're not the one she wants the most. And that's not about your looks, money, or status. It's about how she feels when she's around you. If her emotions don't align with her ideal fantasy, she'll begin to withdraw no matter how well you treat her. That's the painful part. You can give her stability, affection, loyalty, everything a man is supposed to give, but if her emotions are elsewhere, none of it will be enough. When she starts emotionally comparing you to another man, you won't see it right away, but you'll feel it. You'll sense her attention split in two directions, her emotional energy stretched thin between curiosity for someone else and obligation toward you. It'll show in the way she talks to you, not directly, but through subtle shifts. She'll mention other people more casually, like it's nothing. She'll reference stories that don't include you. She might even start using phrases like "my friend said" more often. And though she doesn't name him, you can tell by the way her tone softens that this friend isn't just a friend. The woman who used to seek your validation now seems satisfied by attention from elsewhere, and that's what makes it so disorienting. You start to question yourself. Am I imagining this? Am I overthinking? But no, you're not. You're feeling the quiet unraveling of connection. The moment when her emotional curiosity for you has been replaced by someone else's emotional gravity. You see, women don't just wake up one morning and decide to leave. Their disconnection starts silently. It begins as emotional neglect. She stops being excited to share things with you. Then it becomes mental detachment. she stops planning a future with you. And finally, it turns physical. She stops reaching for you, touching you, or desiring intimacy. But by the time you notice the last part, the first two have already died long ago. The hardest truth a man must accept is this: attraction isn't lost overnight, but it fades fast once it's replaced. And when you're not her best option anymore, she won't fight for the relationship, because in her mind, she's already preparing her emotional escape route. Women rarely break up when they're confused. They break up when they've made peace with the idea of living without you. That's why her silence feels colder than usual. It's not hesitation, it's closure disguised as calm. And in your confusion, you'll probably do what almost every man does. You'll try to fix it. You'll try to remind her of how much you care, how much effort you've put in, how loyal you've been. But here's the brutal reality. Effort can't revive attraction. Once emotional curiosity is gone, you can't negotiate desire. You can't talk your way back into being her favorite choice. In fact, the more you try, the further she pulls away, because to her, your need to prove yourself is evidence that you already know you're losing her. Women are emotional creatures, and when they sense a man's fear of loss, their instinct isn't to comfort him, it's to distance themselves. Because attraction for them thrives on confidence, not comfort. She doesn't want to feel like you're pleading for her affection. She wants to feel like she's earning your presence. And once that dynamic flips, your emotional investment becomes her advantage. This is where the mental war begins. The quiet, invisible battle between the man trying to hold on and the woman already letting go. She starts measuring her emotions differently. Every interaction becomes a comparison. Do I feel more understood here or there? Does he make me laugh more? Do I miss him when he's gone? Or do I feel relieved? You might not realize it, but she's already building emotional contrast in her head. And that's deadly, because once a woman starts emotionally contrasting two men, even if one of them is just a fantasy, the current relationship becomes the control group she's mentally detaching from. That's why her affection starts to feel forced. That's why she looks distracted when you're talking. That's why intimacy feels like a performance, not connection. She's no longer in the moment with you. She's rehearsing what it would feel like with someone else. And that's the stage where most relationships quietly die before anyone says a word. But here's where your strength as a man truly gets tested. Not when she pulls away, but when you decide how to respond. Most men crumble at this stage. They chase harder, overthink every silence, and start turning into emotional detectives, analyzing every text, every emoji, every delay like it's evidence of betrayal. But that's not strength. That's emotional desperation. The truth is, the moment you sense she's treating you like a backup option, your best move is silence. Not the angry kind, not the dramatic kind, but the kind that says, I see what's happening, and I choose peace over panic. Because the moment you stop reacting, you force her to face her own disconnection. She starts wondering why you're so calm, why you're not begging, why your energy suddenly feels detached. That's when curiosity returns, because nothing unsettles a woman more than a man who stops chasing without warning. It flips the power dynamic completely. When you finally stop reacting, something shifts inside her, and it's not immediate, but it's powerful. At first, she'll feel relief, like the tension between you has finally dissolved. She'll tell herself, good, he's not texting as much, maybe we're just drifting apart naturally. But as the days pass, that comfort turns into confusion. Your silence becomes a presence of its own, heavy, noticeable, unexplainable. She'll start wondering what's changed. She expected you to chase. She expected you to fight for her. She expected tears, arguments, proof of devotion. But instead, you gave her nothing, and that nothing begins to echo louder than any words could. Because women are emotional feelers, and the moment she senses your detachment is genuine, it messes with her entire perception. The man she thought she had power over suddenly feels out of reach. The validation she took for granted disappears, and in that emptiness, she starts to miss the energy you used to give. Not because she wants you back, but because she can't stand losing the control she once had. See, women rarely value what's consistent. They value what they feel they might lose. When your energy was constant, when you were always available, always reassuring, always giving, she got comfortable. She stopped being grateful because your presence became predictable. But when you withdraw that presence, When you stop explaining, stop texting first, stop waiting for her to come around, the entire emotional landscape changes. Now, her mind has no closure, and that's what haunts her. Women crave emotional certainty. They need to feel where they stand. When you don't give her that anymore, she starts searching for it on her own, replaying memories, checking your socials, thinking about how quickly you went quiet. It's the mystery that drives her crazy, not the loss itself, because she can replace your attention, but she can't replace the way your absence made her feel. That confusion becomes the seed of her regret. And here's the irony, most men never understand. You don't make her miss you by reminding her of your worth. You make her miss you by removing her certainty. When she doesn't know what you're thinking, when she can't predict your next move, when she feels the emotional void that your silence leaves behind, that's when her curiosity transforms into longing. It's not about manipulation, it's about reclaiming the balance that got lost. When you started chasing validation instead of commanding respect, your quiet detachment becomes magnetic because it's rooted in strength, not spite. It tells her, I'm not angry, I'm just done explaining myself. And that calm composure is what makes her feel small in comparison, not because you're trying to hurt her, but because you've elevated yourself to a level of peace she can't reach. The more grounded you become, the more unshakable you appear. And the more unshakable you appear, the more her emotional chaos starts turning inward. When she sees you moving differently, not colder, just calmer, that's when her mind begins to spiral. She'll start asking herself questions she never asked before. Was he really that into me? Did he lose interest? Is he seeing someone else? Was I the problem? That uncertainty eats at her, because for the first time, she's not the one in control of the emotional tempo. You've taken away her power to dictate the dynamic. And women, especially those used to being pursued, can't handle that shift easily. She'll test you, maybe reach out with a soft text, a random memory, or a subtle question just to gauge your reaction. But the truth is, these aren't acts of care, they're acts of curiosity. She's trying to see if your energy still belongs to her, and the moment you respond too eagerly, she gets her answer you were waiting. But when you remain calm, measured, even slightly indifferent, that's when she realizes the balance has shifted for good. This is the turning point, the moment she begins to feel what you've already accepted. She starts to realize that your silence wasn't a tactic, it was a transformation. You didn't go quiet to punish her, you went quiet to protect your peace. You stopped fighting for her attention because you finally started fighting for your self-respect. And deep down, she feels that difference. She can sense when a man's energy comes from fear and when it comes from power. The man who withdraws out of insecurity is easy to read, but the man who withdraws out of clarity, who knows his worth, knows his boundaries, and refuses to beg for what's already his, becomes unforgettable. That's when she begins to regret losing you, not because she suddenly loves you more, but because she finally realizes what she lost. A man who loved her deeply, but loved himself more. The irony of emotional detachment is that it doesn't make you colder, it makes you clearer. Once you've stopped chasing someone who undervalued your energy, you begin to see how much of yourself you poured into trying to be understood. You remember all the times you explained your intentions, clarified your worth, justified your actions, only to be met with confusion or indifference. That's when it hits you. She never needed more effort from you. She needed to feel something she didn't anymore. And that's not something you can fix with words. So you start withdrawing, not out of anger, but out of self-awareness. You begin to rebuild your emotional walls, not as barriers, but as boundaries. You start protecting your peace the same way you once protected her feelings. And as your energy becomes scarce, she starts to feel the void, because women never notice the value of your presence until it's no longer available on demand. It's almost poetic, the way the power dynamic reverses. When you chased, she pulled away. When you spoke, she ignored. But when you went silent, she began to listen. Not because you finally said the right words, but because your silence became the loudest thing she's ever heard. She starts remembering your calm tone, your consistency, the way you made her feel secure, all the things she took for granted while seeking excitement elsewhere. That's when she realizes something deep. She didn't leave because you weren't enough. She left because she confused stability with boredom. It's a lesson many women learn too late, that the thrill they chase eventually fades, but the peace they abandoned never stops haunting them. And now, while she's busy trying to recreate that feeling with someone new, you're no longer waiting. You've already moved on, not to another woman, but to a higher version of yourself. As you grow into that new version, something profound happens. You no longer look at relationships the same way. You start to see how much emotional energy men give away too easily, seeking validation, begging for loyalty, mistaking drama for depth. You begin to realize that attraction isn't about constant effort. It's about presence, restraint, and emotional control. You learn that the man who doesn't rush to prove himself is the one who leaves the deepest impression. The man who doesn't panic when she withdraws, who stays composed, patient, unbothered, becomes the one she can't stop thinking about. That's the paradox of masculine energy. The more grounded you are, the more unstable she becomes. Not because you're manipulating her emotions, but because your calmness exposes her chaos. You've become a mirror she can't look away from, a reflection of everything she lost while chasing temporary highs. And while she's out there searching for something new, what she's really searching for is the feeling you gave her, that safety, that calm, that quiet strength that doesn't need to announce itself. But she won't find it easily, because most men today are either too eager or too emotionally unavailable. They either worship her or use her, and neither creates respect. You, however, occupy the middle ground, the rare kind of man who can love deeply but remain detached, who can give affection without dependence, who can walk away without bitterness. That balance is what makes you unforgettable. Even if she's moved on physically, her subconscious will keep replaying your energy. Every time she meets someone new, she'll measure him against the emotional standard you set, and none of them will feel the same, because peace, once felt, becomes the new addiction. And you, without even realizing it, became her first taste of it. But here's the part most men never understand. Once you reach this level of emotional clarity, her regret no longer matters. You stop caring whether she misses you, because your growth has outpaced her importance. You've outgrown the version of yourself that needed her validation. You've stopped chasing closure from people who can't even confront their own guilt. You've learned that real strength isn't in proving your worth to others, it's in walking away from those who can't see it. And that's the ultimate freedom, knowing that your peace is more valuable than her presence. When she finally realizes that the man she lost is no longer waiting, no longer angry, no longer affected, that's when the regret truly hits her. Because she'll understand what you've known for a while now. The man who can walk away quietly is the one who was never meant to beg for love in the first place. When you reach that level of inner peace, it's not arrogance that fills you, it's clarity. You begin to see how much energy you wasted trying to be chosen instead of realizing you were the prize the whole time. That's the shift every strong man eventually experiences. He stops performing for women and starts embodying value effortlessly. Your calmness becomes confidence, your silence becomes power, and your independence becomes magnetism. You no longer need to chase anyone because you've learned to attract through stillness. You no longer fear losing her because you've learned to walk alone without feeling empty. And that emotional neutrality drives her insane because she remembers the version of you that was once emotionally available, eager, and loving. But this version of you, he's dangerous, not because he's cruel, but because he's free. You've detached from her approval, and in doing so, you've become everything she can't control, but secretly craves. You see, women are drawn to emotional gravity, that deep, steady energy that anchors them when their emotions spiral. When you were chasing, your energy was unstable, unpredictable, and needy. But now, after the storm, you've become still. You've found that calm power within yourself, and she can sense it. The same woman who once overlooked you will now look at you differently, curious, unsettled, maybe even intimidated, because you're no longer reacting to her moods. You don't flinch when she pulls away. You don't chase validation through attention. You've learned that peace isn't passive, it's controlled dominance. It's the quiet authority that says, I am enough, whether you're here or not. And women feel that. They might not say it out loud, but they recognize the shift. It changes the dynamic entirely. You're no longer orbiting her, she's orbiting you. The most fascinating thing about this transformation is how she begins to question her own choices. The same woman who once thought she could do better now wonders if she made a mistake. She'll remember your consistency, how you showed up without games, how you protected her peace even when she couldn't protect her own. She'll replay the memories, but this time through the lens of loss. Every time a new man disappoints her, every time she feels unseen, every time she realizes excitement doesn't equal safety, she'll think of you, not because she misses your attention, but because she misses the man who made her feel grounded, and by then, it's too late. Because while she's living in the past, you've built a future. While she's searching for familiarity, you've evolved into a mystery she'll never fully understand again. That's the price of losing a man who outgrew her emotional chaos. He doesn't come back. At this stage, you no longer move from pain, you move from purpose. You begin to realize that everything she did, every withdrawal, every rejection, every moment of indifference was a lesson in disguise. She unknowingly trained you to become the version of yourself that no longer tolerates uncertainty. You start valuing peace more than passion, solitude more than superficial company, boundaries more than begging. You've learned that love without respect isn't love, it's emotional slavery. And that's when you start attracting differently. You stop attracting chaos, because your spirit no longer vibrates at that frequency. You start attracting calm, emotionally mature women who don't play games because they've also been through the fire. But here's the twist. Even if no one comes along, you're fine, because you no longer need someone to complete you. You've become whole. That's the secret they never tell men. Once you master solitude, you become untouchable, and that's when life begins to move effortlessly again. You stop checking your phone, stop waiting for closure, stop wondering what she's doing or who she's with. You realize that letting go wasn't the loss, it was the liberation. You start seeing your silence as sacred, not a reaction, but a boundary. You no longer chase peace through people, you carry it within you. And she feels that deeply, because a man who's truly at peace can't be manipulated, controlled, or replaced. He's rare, he's magnetic. He's the kind of man every woman remembers long after she's moved on. Not because he begged, but because he walked away without resentment. So when you finally look back, it's not with anger, it's with gratitude. Because losing her wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Preparation for the kind of life, love, and power that only comes to men who stopped chasing approval and started becoming the source of their own worth. When you master silence and detachment, the world starts to respond differently to you. Especially women. The same energy that once chased validation now radiates composure, and women by nature are drawn to what they can't fully figure out. When you no longer over-explain, over-give, or overthink, they start leaning in, trying to decode your calmness. They sense that something about you has changed. You've become unpredictable in the most attractive way. They can't control your emotions anymore, and that unsettles them. Because women subconsciously crave men whose peace they can't disturb. You stop being the man they can easily manipulate, and instead, you become the one they respect in silence. They might still test you, with their tone, with their distance, with subtle emotional games, but when you stay unbothered, those tests start turning into attraction. Because the man who can't be moved emotionally holds the strongest position in her mind. He's rare, and he's real. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing women, they start needing you. Not for validation, not even for love, but for grounding. Your energy becomes the calm center of the chaos they live in. While most men are still playing games, reacting to every shift, you're living in stillness. You've learned that attraction isn't created through effort, it's maintained through energy control. You don't respond to every text right away, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're genuinely not waiting. You don't post your emotions online because your emotions aren't for public consumption anymore. You don't chase closure because you've learned that peace is closure. And that self-possession is what changes everything. Women feel it immediately. You're no longer the man trying to prove himself. You've become the man who's already proven, and that quiet confidence creates the kind of gravity that pulls them back in without a single word spoken. Soon you start to notice something interesting. The women who once ignored you now seek your attention again. They try to reignite old conversations, send subtle check-ins, or appear on your feed like ghosts from a past life. But this time you see through it. You understand that their curiosity isn't about love, it's about validation. They want to know if they still have access to your energy, if they still have the power to make you react, but your silence disarms them. You don't chase, you don't argue, you don't even retaliate. You respond with calm detachment, short, polite, composed, and that's what kills them inside. Because now you're not fighting for their attention, you're showing them how it feels to lose access to your peace. The very peace they once took for granted has become the thing they crave the most. And the cruel truth? You're no longer willing to share it with anyone who hasn't earned it. That's when they finally understand what kind of man you've become. The man who once sought love now seeks purpose. The man who once needed validation now values discipline. You don't get pulled into drama because you've realized that drama is emotional poverty and peace is wealth. You no longer measure love by intensity. You measure it by consistency. You're no longer addicted to potential. You're loyal to standards. And that shift in your psychology changes everything. You stop feeling angry at women for leaving. Instead, you start thanking them for revealing who you truly are. Because every heartbreak, every rejection, every betrayal became a stepping stone toward emotional mastery. You've become the man who can't be broken by loss because he doesn't find his identity in others anymore. The world hasn't changed, you have. And in that change lies your true power, emotional sovereignty. Now, when you walk into a room, your energy speaks before you do. Women can sense it, that quiet self-assurance, that lack of need, that almost intimidating stillness. You're not trying to impress anyone, yet everyone feels compelled to notice you, because calm energy stands out in a world addicted to noise. You no longer play their games, because you've learned how meaningless they are. You've seen behind the curtain. You've seen how desire fades when it's built on control, and how real attraction grows when it's built on respect. You're not looking for a woman to complete you. You're looking for one who can meet you. And the irony is, that's when the right kind of woman finally appears. Not because you were chasing her, but because your energy started attracting what your old self kept repelling. When you become still, the right people find you. Because peace doesn't chase, it pulls. When you reach this level, something fascinating happens. You stop seeking validation, not only from women, but from the world itself. You start moving with quiet purpose, no longer explaining, no longer proving, no longer reacting. Your goals, your vision, your discipline, they start to become your emotional anchor. While other men crumble over mixed signals and temporary affection, you're building a life so fulfilling that love becomes an addition, not a necessity. You begin to enjoy solitude like it's luxury. You wake up driven, you move with intention, and every action you take reinforces your power. That's what women sense when they cross your path now. That deep, masculine calm, that doesn't waver, that doesn't beg, that doesn't need. They can't place it, but they feel it. That aura of emotional control that only comes from a man who's truly been through loss, learned his lessons, and rebuilt from silence. And here's the beautiful part. Your peace becomes contagious. You'll start noticing how your energy changes. Every environment you walk into, people talk differently around you. They listen when you speak. They respect your space without you having to demand it. That's the difference between the man who chases respect and the man who embodies it. You're not trying to make anyone see your value anymore, because real value doesn't need to shout, it's felt. That's what separates you from who you used to be. There was a time when you needed to be heard, to be seen, to be chosen, but now you're not chasing the spotlight. You've become the light. Your calmness cuts through noise. Your absence commands reflection. And ironically, that's what makes you impossible to forget. Not your words, not your gestures, but the peace you bring that people can't replicate once you're gone. You'll also start realizing that the kind of women who approach you now are very different from those who once entertained you. The ones who used to be impressed by flash, charm, or surface-level confidence won't hold your interest anymore. You'll crave depth, emotional awareness, self-control, maturity. You'll find peace more attractive than beauty. You'll start noticing how rare it is to find someone who can sit with silence without fearing it. And when a woman like that appears, one who matches your energy instead of feeding off it, you won't rush. You'll move slow, deliberate, grounded, because you've learned that true connection doesn't need to be forced. It unfolds naturally when two people meet at the same level of peace. You'll no longer seek validation through chemistry. You'll seek alignment through calmness. That's how evolved men love, deeply, but never desperately. Meanwhile, the women from your past, the ones who once made you doubt yourself, will slowly begin to feel your absence like a phantom ache. Not because you were perfect, but because they realized they'll never meet another man like you. The one who loved them deeply, without losing his masculinity. The one who cared without begging. The one who stayed solid even when she was chaos. They'll try to recreate the energy you gave with others, but it will never feel the same. Because your peace wasn't performative, it was earned. Every quiet boundary, every patient withdrawal, every moment of silence you gave them, taught them a truth they weren't ready for, that a man who's truly done doesn't hate you. He simply stops participating in your chaos, and that absence will haunt them more than anger ever could. And that's when you'll understand something profound, that your silence was never just a reaction, it was your rebirth. It was the moment you stopped defining your worth through someone else's recognition and started defining it through your own peace. You no longer crave closure, because peace became your closure. You no longer look back, because the past taught you everything you needed to move forward. You're no longer bitter, you're aware. You've transcended the need for validation, the addiction to approval, the obsession with being enough. You are enough, not because someone said so, but because you feel it. And that right there is the essence of masculine strength. Not dominance, not control, but emotional mastery. The man who conquers his own emotions doesn't just win in love, he wins in life. And every woman who meets him afterward knows it instinctively. She can feel it in his silence, and she never forgets it. As your transformation deepens, the entire way you move through life begins to change. You stop being reactive to people, to emotions, to uncertainty. You no longer seek peace, you are peace. You become the observer instead of the participant in chaos. You see the games people play, the masks they wear, and instead of feeling bitter, you feel detached, almost compassionate in your distance. You understand that most people live in emotional survival mode, chasing validation just to feel alive, but you're past that now. You've realized that strength isn't in control over others, it's in control over yourself. You're no longer tempted by short-term pleasures or ego-driven connections because you've experienced what it's like to be drained by them. Now, everything about you says discipline. You eat with discipline. You speak with discipline. You love with discipline. Because peace, once earned, becomes sacred, and you'll protect it at all costs. This new energy doesn't just change how women see you, it changes how men see you. You become the kind of man other men quietly study. Even if they don't admit it, they can sense that you're different, that you're not moved by the same things that move them. You don't react to disrespect, you let it collapse under its own weight. You don't seek attention, you attract it through purpose. You don't talk about your value, you demonstrate it in your composure. That's what separates you from the masses. You've detached from the collective emotional noise that most men drown in, constantly chasing, over-explaining, apologizing for being masculine. You've reclaimed the essence of manhood, quiet, stable, anchored. You don't need to dominate, your calmness already commands respect. And that's something both men and women feel instinctively, that silent authority of a man who doesn't need to prove he's powerful because he's already mastered himself. You also begin to see how society has conditioned men to exhaust themselves, chasing affection and approval. From movies to media, from social pressure to dating culture, everything teaches men to earn love by sacrificing their peace. But the moment you detach from that illusion, everything flips. You realize you were never meant to chase love, you were meant to embody it. To become so grounded, so centered, so emotionally full, that love flows from you effortlessly. You're no longer trying to convince anyone to choose you. You're focused on becoming the man who's already chosen by life itself. That's where true masculine power lies, in building a life so meaningful, so abundant, that the right people are drawn to it naturally. You stop seeking love as a goal, and instead you build yourself into someone love can't resist aligning with. That's how kings love, from overflow, not from emptiness. And in that overflow, you find your real mission again. Because once you stop obsessing over who's staying or leaving, you finally have energy for what actually matters: creation, purpose, legacy. You start pouring your attention into your craft, your health, your vision. You realize that women were never your true distraction, your lack of direction was. Now, every ounce of energy that used to go into trying to fix or win someone back goes into becoming unshakable. You no longer seek emotional highs, you seek long-term alignment. You're building things that outlast temporary emotions, your discipline, your mindset, your empire. That's when the same silence that once felt like loneliness starts to feel like freedom. You're not avoiding connection, you're filtering it. You're no longer chasing what's exciting, you're protecting what's eternal, because a man with peace, purpose, and standards doesn't chase storms. He builds foundations that weather them. And here's the truth. Every man who's walked this path eventually learns. Once you find yourself, you realize that losing her was never a tragedy. It was an awakening. She wasn't the ending, she was the mirror that showed you where you were weak. Every tear you shed became proof that you cared deeply. But every silence afterward became proof that you grew wisely. You now understand that love isn't about possession, it's about alignment. That not every woman who loves you can walk your path, and not every woman who walks away truly loses you. Some just make space for you to rise. And when that realization hits, you stop resenting, you stop reminiscing, you stop reaching back. Because you know now that the man who can love fiercely, lose gracefully, and rise peacefully is the man no heartbreak can ever break again. That's not just growth, that's transcendence. And once you reach that, there's no going back. At this level, something powerful begins to unfold. You no longer participate in life, you orchestrate it, you move differently. There's weight in your silence, authority in your words, and intention in your presence. You're no longer pulled by emotion or impulse, you're guided by principle. When people speak, you listen without judgment, but your mind filters noise effortlessly. You no longer chase excitement because you've learned that excitement is fleeting. What truly lasts is stability. And that's what you radiate now. Stability, focus, direction. You're not trying to be admired, yet admiration follows you. You're not trying to be desired, yet your calm energy becomes magnetism in its purest form. You've entered that rare space where you don't need to prove you're in control. The world can feel it. Even chaos begins to adjust around your stillness. That's when you realize the man who controls his emotions doesn't just survive life, he shapes it. Your presence now carries a certain tension, not because it's aggressive, but because it's deliberate. Every move you make feels intentional, every silence strategic. You've learned to conserve energy. You no longer waste it convincing others, arguing over perceptions, or reacting to emotional bait. You know that the loudest voice in any room is the one that doesn't need to speak. And women feel that energy instantly. You're not giving mixed signals anymore. You're giving discipline. You're showing that you're not driven by temporary validation, but by long-term purpose. That's what separates you from 99% of men. Most are ruled by impulses, while you're led by vision. And ironically, that restraint, that lack of emotional volatility, becomes the most attractive thing about you. Because while others chase pleasure, you chase mastery. You've stopped asking for connection to complete you. You now choose connection that complements you. That's real power. Selective peace. And as your life stabilizes, you start noticing how different everything feels. The world seems slower, clearer. You begin to understand that success and peace aren't built through chaos. They're built through consistency. You wake up earlier. You move with intention. You say no more than yes. Your time becomes your most sacred currency. You're no longer desperate for opportunities or affection because you know that what's meant for you flows towards discipline, not desire. You begin to appreciate simplicity, a quiet morning, a focused workday, a clear mind. That's the kind of fulfillment no relationship could ever give you. And yet, that's the version of you that women find irresistible. Not the one chasing them, but the one building something so strong within himself that they want to be part of it. You've shifted from emotional dependence to emotional dominance, and that in modern times is revolutionary. People will start to notice your distance and call it arrogance, but you know it's not that. It's self-preservation. You've been through emotional storms, you've been misunderstood, you've been drained. So now you guard your peace like a fortress. You've learned that not everyone deserves access to you. You understand that giving energy to the wrong person isn't kindness, it's self-sabotage. So you move in silence, you keep your circle small, and you protect your mental clarity like gold. You're not antisocial, you're selective. You're not cold, you're composed. You no longer seek to prove your intentions because real ones don't need to be defended. And when people misunderstand your calmness as indifference, you don't correct them. Because the truth is, The man who explains himself too much has already lost his power. Silence is your armor now, and peace is your weapon. That's the stage where your energy becomes almost untouchable. The same women who once dismissed you for being too quiet or too serious now look at you with admiration and curiosity. They can sense that something about you is rare, that quiet strength, that unwavering center, that self-assurance that doesn't demand attention but commands it. You've become a mirror to their instability, a standard they can't meet but desperately want to understand. And it's not because you're unapproachable, it's because you no longer operate from need. You're complete. Your love isn't desperate, it's deliberate. Your time isn't free, it's earned. You've evolved from being emotionally reactive to being spiritually grounded. You no longer seek comfort, you embody it. You no longer need validation, you radiate it. You're not the same man she once knew. You're the man she prays to meet again, not realizing he was born from the silence she once ignored. At this point, you begin to understand the deeper truth about why peace feels so rare, because it cannot coexist with chaos. You realize that every time you chase someone who doesn't value you, you are not pursuing love, you are abandoning yourself. You start seeing how society conditions men to overextend emotionally, to fix, to explain, to overgive, and how this drains their strength over time. But you've outgrown that version of yourself. You no longer give to be understood, you give because it aligns with who you are. You no longer wait for people to get it, you understand that not everyone is meant to. Your energy is sacred now, and it moves with discernment. The people who once took your silence as weakness now recognize it as power, because silence from a man who knows his worth isn't emptiness. It's judgment, it's reflection, it's the sound of detachment becoming wisdom. And that wisdom transforms how you deal with love, heartbreak, and attraction itself. You no longer see rejection as loss, you see it as redirection. You stop trying to win women over because you understand that true desire can't be negotiated. A woman who's truly aligned with you won't make you question your worth. She won't create distance just to see if you'll chase. She won't punish your calmness with games. You start to see how emotional manipulation, the silence tests, the hot and cold affection, the manufactured distance are all tactics of women who crave control, not connection. But you've learned the one truth that breaks the cycle. Control doesn't work on a man who doesn't react. When you don't chase, you take away their leverage. When you don't argue, you take away their script. When you don't beg, you take away their power. Your stillness becomes their mirror, and few can handle their own reflection. As your awareness grows, something remarkable happens. You stop fighting for relationships that drain you. You stop confusing loyalty with self-sacrifice. You start honoring the truth that love without respect is manipulation, and connection without peace is imprisonment. You learn to walk away from any situation that disturbs your calm, not out of ego, but out of self-respect. You're no longer impressed by beauty, charm, or emotional highs. You're drawn to emotional regulation, to maturity, to consistency. And when a woman tries to bait you into the same emotional patterns that once broke you, you no longer flinch. You smile, not in arrogance, but in understanding. Because now you know the secret. Most people aren't toxic by nature, they're addicted to chaos. And the best way to defeat chaos isn't by matching its energy, but by starving it. That's what your silence does now. It starves manipulation of oxygen. You begin to realize that your peace is the most intimidating energy a man can possess. It's not loud, it's not flashy, it's not ego-driven. It's quiet, consistent, immovable. It doesn't beg for closure or demand validation. It simply stands there, unaffected. And for women who are used to controlling through emotion, that peace is terrifying. Because they can't read you, they can't move you, they can't break you. You've become the emotional equivalent of a fortress, and that's when they realize they underestimated you. All along, they thought your silence meant surrender, but in truth, it was strategy. You weren't withdrawing to avoid pain, you were withdrawing to grow power. And now, that power radiates in everything you do. You've become the storm they never saw coming, not because you attacked, but because you stopped engaging. That's the kind of man who's not just remembered, he's studied. And when you reach this final stage, you finally understand the purpose of it all. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every moment of confusion was a lesson in sovereignty. You were never losing them, you were finding yourself. You were never abandoned, you were redirected. The silence that once felt unbearable has now become your sanctuary. You've stopped reacting to temporary emotions and started responding with permanent principles. You've mastered the art of restraint, and in doing so, you've become untouchable. Not cold, not bitter, just whole. Because the man who no longer needs validation to feel valuable is the man every woman secretly fears losing, not because he's perfect, but because he's free. And freedom, that's the one thing you can't fake, can't manipulate, can't control. It's the quiet victory of a man who chose himself, and in doing so, became everything he was searching for.